Hey, I'm John. Welcome to Mr. G's Workbench. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. If you're coming back, thank you for coming back from part one. Got my assistant Dexter here with me today. You might have heard him snoring in part one if you go back and listen. We're building Kitty Hawk's MiG-25 PU, the two-seat trainer, in 1/48 scale. In part one, we assembled the cockpits. We install them into the forward fuselage parts. In this episode, we're going to put them together. We're going to get the nose put together. We're going to put together the main gear bays, and we're going to complete assembly of the front of the intakes. We're going to see if we have any issues along the way. Now, before we go on, again, a big thanks to Jim at Kitmaker Network for providing the kit that we're looking at. And I'll leave a link in the description below. You can go check out Aeroscale and also check out the rest of the Kitmaker Network of websites. And stay tuned. So if you remember, we left off with, this was at the end of step 4. We had assembled this is the rear cockpit into the fuselage sides. Now something we're going to do here, we're going to skip ahead on the directions. We're going to go out of sequence because I think it's going to be important to try and get a clean build here. Is I'm going to take the two fuselage halves that are going to make up the nose and the forward cockpit assembly. We're gonna assemble this. We're going to add that nice big ball bearing that Kitty Hawk gave us. We're going to fasten that in here. We'll add the weight in, and then we'll add these fuselage sides on now to make the nose up. So after I get that done, I think it'll make it easier to clean up. There's obviously going to be a line here, a joint. That's going to need some work, so better to do it now and when this is attached to the rest of the fuselage. To step 18 to assemble the front cockpit into the actual nose. So that's done. I've got the two halves put together. I tried to shore up the inside here with as much CA as I could get in without making a mess. One of the things I also did was I sanded down the sides of the cockpit that you can't see where it's sandwiched in to try and give it as tight a fit as possible. So what we're going to try to do now, I'm going to try to attach this here. We've got that giant ball bearings in there now. I'm going to glue it, and then what I'm going to do, because it had just a little bit of play in it, is I'm going to glue it and then I'm going to try to clamp down the sides, give it a little pinch, because it'll be easier to clean up the seams on the top and the bottom than to worry about any kind of weird gaps on the sides. So let's do that. So here we are. Let's see if I can get this all in. So I put the two halves of the nose together, and of course there's a nice seam right here. I puttied it, I sanded it as best I could, and then as I did on the intakes, I went back, I re-riveted and re-scribed everything I could, And then I checked my work with the Tamiya black panel liner. And aside from the seam where the two halves come together, I had to do some seam work on the bottom here. I'm not overly impressed with my own work, to be quite honest. So there's that. Here are the intakes assembled. They needed some putty and sanding here on this one edge. This is already one piece. I put the intake ramps in, like I showed you before, with that little piece of plastic rod in there to support it since it's not touching the sides. And when we finally go to put everything together, we'll have to assemble these intakes into the nose assembly. But I'm not going to do that now. I'm going to wait until we actually have the fuselage assembled, and then we'll figure out this mishmash at one time. So let's move on to we got to do the main gear bays now. Let's take a look at the parts. Step 6 would have you take the resin gear leg, assemble the main tire, attach it, and then you'd go to step 7. You assemble one gear bay, and then you would install the leg into it. Let's take a look at the parts. You got E16, you got F10, you got F11, G20, G18, and the resin gear leg. And then this part here, G37, I had the same problem on this one that I had with the other small fiddly part. You get that little part there. It has this extra little piece that was on the end here. It doesn't matter how carefully you try to clip it off, that little piece comes spinning out. So I'm back where I started with this. So I'm going to have to try to reassemble this. Then on top of that, because they want you to put this resin gear leg in, you're forced to put everything together now. You can't put the gear leg in later. You're going to have to put it in when you assemble the bay. So what I plan on doing that I really didn't want to do is I'll put together 3 sides of this. I can put F10, E16, and the ends together. I'll leave F11 off. I'll paint everything. I'll paint the gear leg. And I know I'll regret it later, but there's nothing else I can do with this. And then we'll assemble it, and we'll take a look and see what we have after that. We'll see what it looks like at the end. I tried looking at this a couple of ways. There's no better way to do this. You can't even, Kitty Hawk eliminated any chance of you using the plastic gear legs because there's metal supports that fit inside them, and we don't have them, so we can't even assemble it. So we're going to have to work with this. So off we go. All right, fast forward. We've got these. We've got the bays painted with that same Vallejo duraluminum that I used for the nose gear bay. And for what you're going to see of it, the details, okay? It's not bad. And I managed to not break off the other one of those little tiny parts. So we've got those two. We've got the other side walls. And I've painted I painted the gear legs. This time I learned my lesson from the cockpit parts, and this time I primed the resin gear legs. So I primed them with Mr. Surfacer 1500, and then I painted them with AK Real Colors. I picked out a random gray. I want to say it was 35237, just to put a color on it, because what my plan is at this point, since I have to install these gear legs into the bay, I've got it painted just a basic gray. When I paint the rest of the plane with the correct gray, I'll have the bays kind of blocked up, and then I'll just spray the aircraft color onto the gear legs as well and detail paint them after that. And a side note, the part numbered G18 for this bay and G19 for the other bay, don't install those, because if you install them, you can't install these resin gear legs. It won't work. They just won't fit. But when you go to put this in, when you go to put this gear leg in, if I can get this lined up right, because I got the wrong one in my hand. When you go to put this gear leg in, and you want to get that's supposed to rest on the floor of the bay. It's not going to work. G18 will block that leg from resting properly. G18 probably works in the original kit, so let's give this a shot. So that'll do it for the gear bays. We've got those assembled. I used some thick foxbat-c Maxi Cure. It's an extra thick CA. I used that to install the gear legs into the bays. And while I was doing it, you might have seen I broke one of these again. This is going to drive me nuts. This is why none of this should have to be installed before you get the plane assembled. It's silly. So that's one of the things I can get annoyed with. The legs seem pretty sturdy in here. I'm going to go back. I think before all is said and done, I'm going to wind up putting probably some 5-minute epoxy onto those gear legs to really hold them down. I mean, it's as good as they're going to get. So we'll see what happens with that. And with that, I think we'll wrap up part 2 of this build review. So we've got, going forward, we have the front end done with the cockpits. We've got the fronts of the intakes done. We've got the gear bays done. So next time in part 3, we're going to jump into the fuselage. We're going to be doing the exhausts, and we'll be installing those gear bays into the lower fuselage, and then we're going to put that together. And fingers crossed we won't get too agitated with it. If this was your first time coming, be sure to like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. If you have any comments to make, by all means, I don't mind criticism. So for better or for worse, leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you've built this plane. And if you see anything I'm doing and you can think of a better way to do it, by all means, let me know. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe. You'd be helping me out. Thank you to everybody who watched the first episode and came back for number 2. I really appreciate it. I just want this to be, I want to make this fun for everybody. I want us to all get something out of it. And if you get to have a little fun watching me get agitated building a Kitty Hawk kit, that's fine too. So be sure to come back for the next part in the MiG-25 build, and I'll see you then.